think together in a very important context, post-COVID. Such a dramatic moment in human history where so many things that we never thought about happened. We were shut down, we stayed at home, we saw lives being lost, and lives being lost across society, immaterial of their purchasing power capacities. I also think the invitation that Shankar and Srivat's you continue this, is a rare space today to think freely, to think together, to think in a way that we don't have to defend success alone. And that is the freedom to which our generation was born. I grew up in Nagaland, and so when you speak of peace, it is real for me. I know 16 years of hard work that went into brokering a peace accord where everybody's dignity was maintained. And I remember, I was a very, very little girl then, but I remember coming out of this moment when the peace accord was signed, and Jai Prakash Narayan and the Chief Minister of Nagaland were there, and they said, everybody is happy. It wasn't a simple statement that said everybody is happy. It meant that everybody's dignity was considered in the way it was done. So this evening, I want to remind ourselves of a few things that I've been trained to look at, which is the lives of children, particularly from the viewpoint of health. We have to remember every fourth young person in the world has an Indian passport. We have to remember that every fifth child in the world is an Indian child. So what we do today is not just one of choice, but it is one of responsibility and duty. And therefore, that you gather us here for this conversation is to remind us of the beauty and the power of dialogue, but also, I think, of the duty that each of us have to take, not just for our individual companies, and therefore the suggestion to think beyond boundaries is so critical. We are so happy you're here with us. As we count the numbers, Mr. Arun Maria, I think we also remember that change doesn't happen only based on data. Reason alone cannot be the stimulus or the fountainhead of change, definitely not drastic change. That's the quantum leap we are looking at. And 3 sets of data that is sobering. Mr. Neenan gave us lots of data, but one thing that is always sobering for me is how do we treat and plan for the young of this country. Unemployment is at its highest. And I think, how do we keep this peace that the southern states are experiencing protected and nurtured? We are an unequal society. I don't know if I'm right to say this is the most unequal we have been in 75 years. On another side, we're not counting deaths, we're counting healthy lives. We're counting a food-secure nation. Dr. M.S. Swaminathan a few years ago told me, Vinu, when I had the World Food Prize and I said India should produce a certain volume of food, people laughed at me, and he said, during COVID, he told me, we have not only produced, we have enough for disruption for the next 14 months. This is coming to you now, is how does this radical thought, where everybody features, where does this deep thinking come from? And I know your experience in India with the Boston Consulting and the Innovations Initiative in America gives you a big picture understanding, but you've also been invested in the way systems transform, in the way leaders work in systems, and in the way collaboration can happen. So may I ask you a question first? To describe India as it is today from your eyes, just like we heard the previous speaker speak, and then maybe have a 20-minute flow of your take on how remaking of India can be done based on listening, based on learning, and looking at the future and thinking of it as a shared future. How do you see India now?
Thank you very much. Shankar, she's already said. And she says things very well, so I feel maybe I should just leave it the way she said it. But I do want to acknowledge, Shankar, what you, Srivat, and yourself as curators and Gopal have been doing here to create a space for Indians who care, not just about their own success, but about others in the country, especially, as you said, the poorer people, the less privileged people in this country. They are our country, and they're counting on us to think about them and think about different ways than the one we have been following, which will produce results for them which they haven't got so far after so many years of our independence. So I was invited here, and then I was told that she's going to be asking me questions, and I said, actually, I'd like to ask her questions, because her work, as she said, about public health and keeping children in mind, interfaith dialogues, and integrated rural management, linked to something we heard previously. Those three subjects really do interest me. They do. So shall we start the other way? No, I will go my way, because you asked me a question. Shankar had said to me that he'd like me to have a presentation. Maybe because he thinks I'm a consultant and I like to make a presentation. I said I wasn't thinking of making a presentation. I thought I'd just share stories. And he said, well, you know who they are, and I'm familiar. They would like a crisp presentation. And I realized something, that, you know, numbers are easily better presented in a table, in a chart, where you can be hit by the number. So thanks, Shankar, for that suggestion. It made me then put not my thoughts together as much as the numbers to support my thoughts together into a presentation. As we came here, we discovered it was so bright outside. One, of course, it turned out to be too hot to keep sitting in there. But before they'd been started, the organizer said to me, you know, there's a problem. Your slides, which they already have, if we project them, no one can see them. Do you mind talking without the slides? So I said to her, when we met, so what am I going to do? I said, you know, I can't show the numbers. She said, that's good, because numbers don't tell the reality, tell your stories. So I said, okay, but I am going to be referring to, because it took a lot of trouble to put the numbers together. The subject, the title of what I, at Shankar's request also, made for this discussion was Remaking India, One Country, One Destiny. I'm going to request, please, yourself, Shankar, and your team, to please circulate this online. It's online with you this after, because you'll be able to see the statistics. And I'd like you to see the picture that I found and developed. It was a bit of not artificial intelligence, but using, I made the presentation sitting at home myself, and I felt very proud that at this age, I could make a better presentation, put it together, than the young consultants used to help our partners to make presentations. It's quite good, actually. So please do circulate it. So the picture shows lots of Indians struggling together to put that flag straight up. Remaking India, one country, one destiny. One country. We are the most diverse country in the world, because we are diverse on many dimensions. We have diversity, we talk of Nagaland on one side, to maybe Kutch and Gujarat and Kashmir and down south here, in terms of ethnicity, religions, languages. We know that's the usual diversity we celebrate of our country. But let's not forget, we actually have become, as you pointed out, probably the most, if you want to use the word diverse for that, diverse country in terms of economic prosperity of people. We have amongst the richest people in the world, and we are up in those rankings, and we have, as Mr. Nainan said, yet the poorest large population in the world. So these are the dimensions of diversity. We set out on this tryst with destiny, where we said that Purna Swaraj, every Indian man and woman will have equal freedoms, not equality, but equal freedoms, equal political freedom, equal social freedom, and equal economic freedom. We have perhaps achieved, in some formal way, equal political freedom by the right to cast a vote for the government. It still doesn't make equal political freedom because power is exercised in other ways too. We certainly are long ways away from achieving equal social freedom. The caste system is still rampant, and I'm afraid is being encouraged for political reasons. And thirdly, economic freedom, which is maybe mostly what we'd be concerned about. It's hardly, people do not have equal opportunity. You point to jobs and incomes and the chance to earn a decent wage by doing decent work. Those opportunities are actually diminishing. What's that due to? Is it due to AI? No, AI is hardly here. It's to do, if I could say, therefore, with the wrong economic model. I was invited by Dr. Manmohan Singh out of the blue. Monte called me when I was in Prague and said, Arun, what are you doing out there? I said, I retired finally, and Shama and I are off on a holiday. He said, hey, the Prime Minister wants to speak to you. I said, the Prime Minister speak to me? He says, yes, he wants to invite you to be a member of the Planning Commission. I said, you're joking. But I did get a call from the Prime Minister who said, Arun, would you serve the country? I was in a tram holding on somewhere, I stood up and wanted to salute and almost fell. Of course I want to serve my country. And he said, but Planning Commission and a member, I came promptly back to Delhi and I asked him, I said, sir, I'm not an economist and I've never worked in government. Are you sure you got the right, Arun? I'm M-A-I-R-A, Myra. He said, Arun, I know you. I know you're not an economist and I know you never worked in government. That is why I want to have you. Besides, like you said, your work has been on helping organizations, organizational systems, to gather their aspiration together and change and transform themselves. You've done it with companies and for companies. But think about the larger process of this whole system of a country. But within that, what could the Planning Commission do to induce change in the formations of economic systems and social systems in the country? Well, it was such a profound question to be asked. So I spent some wonderful years, 5 years in the Planning Commission, learning some few things. But the Prime Minister, when he said there's a goal, faster growth, our plans were faster growth, and we've added on, Montek is here, faster inclusion and more sustainability. And I put some statistics together, and I'm just going to use and read out just the top lines. Excuse me. You know, we've been, and he said so himself, Dr. Manmohan Singh, he was celebrated as the father of India's liberalization, and he is, and we must give him a full credit for that thought and the courage to push through, with political support, that change. Since 1990, I've got the statistics from 1989, how has India done compared with other countries? Let's not compare ourselves with our own past. If we are in a world where we want to learn, learning whether we did better than before and let's do more of this is not enough. If someone is doing the same thing better than you, let's be open and ask about it. So we must compare how India's done, and I've got here, which you'll see in the chart which you get, compared with Bangladesh within the subcontinent, China and Vietnam. Our per capita income of India in 1989 was $330. And let me leave Bangladesh out, it was poorer. And we know it has somehow caught up in terms of exceeded us in per capita income. But I'm going to jump to China and Vietnam. China was $314, we were $330. Vietnam was $98, we were $330. By 2023, for which I've got sort of supposedly good statistics, India is 2,400, China 12,700, Vietnam is 4,350. India's GDP per capita has increased. We keep saying, look, so much poverty reduction, GDP has gone up 7.3 times. China's 40.4 times. Vietnam's 44.4 times. In terms of human development indicators, which ultimately is what we should be focused on, our rank, India's, is 134 out of whatever, 180, 90 countries. Bangladesh is better than us already, 129. China 79 and Vietnam 107. According to the UN, Bangladesh and India are called medium development, and already China and Vietnam are called high development. So can we learn from the East for a change and not keep looking at the West? Of course, we don't want to learn from these two countries, Vietnam and China, because they are socialist countries. I, in my career with Tatas, very early on got the opportunity in the 1960s, after Singapore became independent, and Lee Kuan Yew requested J.R.D. Tata to help with helping Singapore create a skill development process to create a skilled workforce which would be working on higher value, and not just on labor cost competitive advantage in that area. And he said, Tata's is the only organization he's found amongst the investors from Japan, Germany, and so on, who remember, their managers remember how this is done because they're doing it and have done it in their own life. Those people have forgotten it was done 100 years ago. You better have a country with good infrastructure and good skill development, then we'll come and invest. Please help. And he said this, Lee Kuan Yew, he said, I want the wages, the incomes of the people of Singapore to rise faster than everybody else's and be higher, because then the GDP will be high. He didn't start the other way, and he said so. I don't want to first try and increase the GDP and hope that people's incomes will increase. I want to start a model which this will be the pushed up for GDP. So let's look for other models. Why also should we not look at the West? In terms of footprints on the earth, I just compared countries which have over 250 million population, and there are 4 of them: India, China, USA, and Indonesia. Okay, we know India's and China's population 1.4 billion something. USA is 330 billion. Indonesia 278 billion. Footprint, the pressure of population on the land, population per square kilometer. India's is 430, the densest. China 150, and they got much more land and resource than we have per capita. USA 36. They can be luxurious in the way they use land and forests and rivers. They can be luxurious. Indonesia 151. Again, India's 430, 151. In terms of renewable water resources, and India better watch this. We have, in terms of cubic meter per capita per year, 1450. Just to jump, China has more, 2,000. US has 8,800. So if you want models of how to run an economy which is kind to the environment and also inclusive in terms of growth, let's not look to Western economists or Western models of the economy. And here, therefore, I want to say, this was in a slide, which we'll get it, I'll read it to you. An economy lives within a society, which lives within nature. And present economic models that we are applying for development, in the economy is deforming society and nature to suit its own desired form. Converting families into sources of labor for factory employment. It is destroying the system that sustain it. The economic models are destroying the systems of society and the systems of nature that it needs for its own sustenance. So what we have to do, and this is the thinking, please request us, we must reform the formal form of the economy to fit the sustainable, which we call informal forms of society and nature. When I keep hearing people to say, you know, our economy is not sufficiently formalized, I say, thank goodness. Please learn the forms of nature and natural forms of communities and adjust the economy to support and nurture those forms rather than distorting those to provide resources for the growth of the economy. Okay? Now, Einstein, we must always quote, we did it this afternoon also, sorry. Einstein said, you cannot solve problems, complex problems with the same thinking that created them. And I believe we need more systems thinking. But we're not going to spend too much time explaining it because it will deserve a session in itself. Especially complex adaptive systems, systems which within themselves have the capability to adjust their own forms to suit what they would like more of in the future. Okay? Machines don't do this. They don't choose to adjust their form for what they want in the future. Perhaps artificial intelligence may help a machine to do that. The question is, what does artificial intelligence aspire to have in the future? We human beings, we aspire to have humane societies, caring societies. So we have to change the form of our organizations, our economies, to create the world that we wish to have. And the disciplines of systems leaders, I'm going to say some stories about 3 of them. One is about, well, learning, I already mentioned to you. Please, the point is this. Everything in life is about learning. Living is learning. When you're learning, then you're living. When you stop learning, for all practical purposes, your body may live on, but as a human being, you're dead. My work was helping organizations to become faster learning organizations. So as the Prime Minister said, apply that idea, how can nations be faster learners? So if you compare India with China, if we started at the same point, very complex systems, and China's 44 times faster than us, it must have learned faster than us how to manage a very complex social economic system. And Vietnam equally fast or faster. How do countries learn? And countries learn and create capabilities which they never had before by learning at 3 levels. One is the level of the people inside the country, the workers, they get skills to do things which add more value. They get compensated better and adds more to the value of the GDP of their country. Organizations, leaders, must learn how to take advantage of this surplus resource that we have of human beings aspiring for better lives. Are our organizations learning well enough and fast enough? Well, evidently not, if the outcomes are what we see. The third, and this is where in the Planning Commission I had the privilege, therefore, of asking World Bank to do some comparisons, that if China has learned faster than us, tell me, how does the policymakers of China learn? How do they adjust their policies? How come they didn't get captured into the Western thought about liberalization? We half escaped it, thank goodness. Russia just got captured into the Big Bang, and look what happened to it. China's being accused that you somehow joined the system, but you cheated. Vietnam, even today, though it's signing free trade agreements, the US has declared it's a socialist country, and therefore we cannot have other sort of arrangements with them. So this word socialism is in the US, of course, it's a dirty word, but it's becoming a dirty word in my country. Oh, what is socialism? Socialism means care about society. Capitalism means care for capital. I want to care about society, and I don't care if someone calls me a socialist. I want to get to the fundamentals and not the terminologies. How does one care for every living thing inside one system? What is the policy maker learning? Is he learning or she learning well enough? So we clearly, as the World Bank then said, since you asked us, you are one of the poorest learning nations. And if your people are not learning the right skills, it's because your organization, your policymakers are not learning what they should do well enough. So the stories are 2 just. One is to do with listening. And in this one take, and the Prime Minister gave me this privilege to say, well, here, you're on the Planning Commission to rethink how we do planning. And, well, I didn't know it. And my grandson, who was 7 years old, from the US, lived there, came to India, and he'd been here at 5. And he was seeing poverty here, which he never saw there. And he was always very compassionate and said, but why are the people so poor here? At 5 when he came. When he came at 7, I was in the Planning Commission, and I was driving around in my nice car with him. And he saw, again, in Luton's Delhi, Nizamuddin, so many poor people and beggars. So he broke out into a yell. That was at the time we were in the Planning Commission trying to convince everybody by the Tendulkar poverty line that actually there are not that many poor people as people say they are, and we are doing not that badly. We're not doing well, but not that badly. And dear Viren explodes in the car looking at all the beggars. He said, what's the government doing here? Counting daisies? So I said, counting daisies? He says, yes, look at all those poor people. Can't they see them? What's the government doing? So my son was sitting with him, said, Hare, your Dadaji is government now. He said, this fellow's government? So I had to explain to him what government does. So I showed him our planning documents at home, the previous plan with all the numbers and the tables. And he said this. He said, Dadaji, don't count the poor people. Go listen to them. Because if you listen to the poor people of and he wrote a book himself. He told me don't write books. He wrote one, 14 pages with cartoons and things. And he said there's a picture there. He said the planning community, he called it, is a place where all the poor people of India can come and there will be someone there to listen to them. And then they will not be poor anymore. That sentence has so struck me. Someone there will listen to them and then they will not be poor anymore. There are two parts to this. One, the dignity that you give somebody by actually listening to their point of view. You don't feel as poor. The second is they really know the problem that they are facing. They have the insights into the frugal solutions for it. Listen, you might get the right solutions also. Lastly, to your subject of integrated rural development and stuff. We were talking about the SDGs. We have 17 SDGs, right? They're very important, all of them. Public health, education, environment, livelihoods. You take the lot. I mean, you can't take out any one of them and say you create a good world. And these 17 problems exist almost everywhere, in every district. Not all 17, 6, 7 of them at least. Now, if you've got a complex system in which environmental problems, education problems, health problems, livelihood problems, social problems are existing, do you think the system takes the same form everywhere? No. So I did some mathematics. If I take 7 variables out of a set of 17, how many combinations can there be? 94 million. So you cannot have even a few universal solutions which are applicable in various districts. And so when people talk about model city and model village, I said all bunkum. It has to be local system solutions found by communities, then supported by the people who have the resource to support them. It's not we give you the solution and give you the resource to implement it. You figure out what would be a good solution here, keeping in mind, and they actually know what to keep in mind, but please think about these 17, they may choose 5, because that matters there, or 3, doesn't matter. At that point of time, what would you think are the important things to do and how? And then, of course, you can help them by analyzing, explaining data, whatever you like. But start there. Start there. So, now you tell me how you go about integrated rural development.
I am going to share this time with the audience because I think what we've just heard from Arun is 3 critical aspects of how he thinks India's remaking or India's future can be. One is, I think, of learning, and I think, Arun, you point as well to be looking around and to see what we're doing. And I think it's worthy of our time to see what models have worked elsewhere. I think it's also very telling that you tell us we don't have to do it all over again. And there are examples of entire nations, but also individual institutions that can lead. And I think that's a very important thing to say at a time when we are ranking amongst the nations of the world. If one dare use the word stepping back and reimagining with humility, I think looking around will be very helpful. You also speak to us of listening. You just spoke to us through the words of your grandson, Arun, about what listening could mean. And I think listening means a lot to every sector that is represented here. Whether it is academia, where generations are trying to share knowledge and the way knowledge is generated. AI is spoken a lot about, but working with children now, I know that just technology will not help. We've had the most climbing curve on suicides amongst young people. So on one side you speak of technology, on another side, are they happy young people? What is it that's driving them to believe that their life is not worth living? So I think listening can mean listening to the young, listening, and we know the data. By 2050, the average age of India will still be 30. I always put this up on my notice board. I'm working for that average age still. I'm not working like they're working in Japan to secure a present and a future for a population that's growing, but I'm working for a young India still. Your listening also means where industry and society can speak together. You're also encouraging us to listen when I think we have a possibility of finding what I call a praxis interaction between the best that labs can produce in terms of knowledge, theory, but also the power to practice. And so I think these are very, very valuable points, Arun, and you say this both looking back, but I know you're invested in the future. So before we come to the last question, maybe I gather 2 questions, because I think that's my mandate here as a moderator, not to ask, but to facilitate the questions. 2 questions, yes, and short questions. Comments in private, questions in public. Please go ahead. Sir.
You are comparing with nations, and listening is another important trait that you brought in. If you go back in 1947 versus South Korea versus India, South Korea was the poorest of poor, but India was far better. And the same way, if you take Singapore, the leadership of Lee Kuan Yew made a big difference. Is that the leadership trait is going to make a big difference? One is listening, learning, and everything is there. But authentic leadership, is that one of the reasons with your purview to make a big difference?
I'll hold on to that. So the leadership trait, does that make a difference? A question from here, and I'll take the one there, from there as well. 3 questions. Please go ahead, Ravi.
Thank you, Arun. That was very inspiring, but I'll pick one of what you said about system thinking. When you look at the business impact on the climate, more than the climate impact on the business, water. We talk a lot about energy transition, but if we need to fix water, the governance model in India has to be really pushed to the bottom of the pyramid. And there are very great examples of what has happened in Aurangabad, and many other places. But I think apart from listening and learning, localizing governance is something India needs, not just for water. If we want to institutionalize systemic thinking, there are many models. For example, if you take Stuttgart as an example, where Volkswagen and Mercedes are there, how the social transformation happened in Germany, just after the Second World War. And when you compare that with what potentially has happened to even Hosur as an example with Titan, there are many models that are available. But I think the governance is very important, and I think that needs to be nailed. Yeah. What's your thoughts on that?
Yeah. So Ravi's question, I think, is about, the power of the localized adaptation and how it works. I think wonderful juxtapose the individual trait and the systemic response. The final question from the rear of the hall.
With regard to learning, right? Are we ashamed of, making mistakes and learning from that as a country, which is hampering our growth, innovation? That's one big question that I have.
I think great question again. Why does one feel shy? Why is it difficult to fail in this culture? These are all questions both for the leader and the nation. I think one more thing that comes with that is also risk-taking, experimentation. I work with children. Somebody said, somebody just ahead of me was speaking about, what can fuel R&D. I think fundamentally, curious minds. What does systems do to the observation that is so innate in a child, that is so innate in early childhood? What happens? How does that? So 3 great questions. Mm-hmm. They combine into one. The power of the individual leader, the potential, the hidden potential of localized response through governance and systems. And I think as a nation and a culture, what can possibly give more space for failure?
Thank you. Yeah, I am 3 questions. There's one which is about curiosity and learning, and I'm putting the 2 together. Listening, and I'm going to put listening into that one. Then we got governance and the type of leadership. It's not leadership, It's the type of leadership. So I want to first take the governance one, and then listening, learning, and then the type of leadership. We embarked, as we said, on a tryst with destiny in 1947. Unfortunately, we lost. I think the real father of this ambition to be a country in which every Indian, woman and man, would have equal freedom. That was Mahatma Gandhi. His model of development, which we started to poo-poo, because, taking us back to the back ages and back to the villages, was he said India lives in its villages, but if you've read Gandhiji, he said actually, we talk about the global village. There's a concept there you're talking, you see. And a global village is made up of villages, and each village must be a harmonious community itself with its nature and amongst itself. Now, this was our model. It's, if I could say, in the basic structure of our constitution, we talk of federal, and into that we had also local self-governance. But Jawaharlal Nehru and the government took another path, and Gandhiji died, unfortunately. But even if he was alive, he would have been a very disappointed man, because there was so much, because there was a need to have a large government to marshal very limited resources, to manage the law and order problems, and tamp down the insecurities of the country. That's why, as Montic pointed out to me, that the first amendment to our constitution was to actually curb free speech, because that was the circumstances of the time. The first amendment to the American Constitution, when they were sort of feeling, we got rid of the British and we got all this land before us, was everyone can speak freely. But of course, they are the country who was now struggling with how to control the sort of the bad free speech. And we, of course, got to the same question. So there's something in the context of history where you do things, but the vision that you have of a complex country in which every human being feels in charge of their life, and you cannot be in charge of your own life if you are not supporting at least your family. Use the word family, maybe loosely, but certainly if you're a man or a woman, your children, and the older people with you, and community, it goes upwards like that. So unless one feels that one belongs to a place and the place belongs to one, we're not going to care for the world at all. So we had this idea, I'm saying, and even today people are saying, why not? And I have to ask ourselves, in our present thinking, how are we preventing this coming about? I'm asking all, whether economists or business leaders. Either because we are poo-pooing it, or we are not putting enough of our might behind it. And it comes to fear of change. Why are we not putting enough of our might behind it? Because that's not me anymore. It's going to be power given away. At the moment, I am the power. I meet in the World Economic Forum. I tell the world what the solutions are. Then who's going to want to listen to me? I'm going to have to listen to those people down there. And maybe that's the last thought I'll give, because Shankar, you asked, but I'll say that later. So talk about leadership. I'm saying leaders have to be learners and not great teachers and controllers, leaders. I want to say anymore. I've got a whole book on the subject, and I was asked to actually, I was going to flash it up there, the names of, by the way, Gopal is here, and Gopal, a very wise man, as you noticed, if he's still here, who asked a profound question earlier, and I promptly had to build on it, because that is the thought. Let's step back and reflect on who we are and what we want to be, not in the efficiency of getting anything done, actually, till first we ponder what we want to get done, then apply technology, if we will, to it or not, to do with that the question there. So in terms of the qualities of a leader, to be a catalyst within a system which will change itself. You are not controlling and changing the system. In fact, you are a part of the system. So the system's ideas, in fact, are your ideas, because it teaches you. You go to the schools and universities or get them from your societies. You cannot diverse yourself from saying, I've got these ideas which are completely clean sheet. I'm a human being, part of something. And so when I then, thinking I'm smarter than the rest of the system, put my idea onto the system, it will react. So if Francis Bacon said in 1600 with the European Enlightenment and science. He said, now with science, man has the power, and man has the power to control unruly nature. God's sake, unruly nature is climate up and down and floods and stuff. It's much wiser and has lasted much longer than us. Just please just learn from nature and don't try and teach nature how to work. So listening and learning, I must come to that. One of the books I've written recently is Listening for Well-Being, Conversations with People Not Like Us. His Holiness the Dalai Lama, I was Chancellor of the university in Himachal Pradesh, Dharamshala. He was our first chief guest, and he read the manuscript of my book, and he wrote the foreword. And he is, is a great curiosity listener. He listens to children, listens to everybody, or he's laughing and saying, oh, so what is this, and so on and so forth. And he gave in that convocation his address about education. He said, we are teaching children how to speak, express themselves clearly, win debates, how to show themselves off and their ideas and overpower others. We don't let children continue to be curious and become even better listeners to things which are not familiar to them and people not familiar. So he and I, at that meeting, because he asked me then to sort of thank him and to say that every school, college should, at the start, say that you are going to learn how to listen to people not like yourself. And if you're in college, you will, during the week, go find people that you normally wouldn't like to be with, you don't like them or their thoughts, and deliberately just go and ask them why they think what they think, and ask their history. Just learn and take interest, and come back at the end of the week and compare notes amongst yourself. This, I believe, is a quality, a discipline we each must have, whether we're a leader or a human being. And India, in this very diverse country, the art of listening to people not like ourselves, to have dialogues and not debates with people not like ourselves. And certainly social media and technology is not going to help you. It can help you to propagate your ideas. It doesn't help you to listen to yourself or to any human being.
Arun, we are in the last sprint of the last 5 or 7 minutes. I know General Brar is here and we want to hear you. I want to bring back a moment from last year's inaugural Nilgiris Economic Dialogue. We were all welcomed by General Brar at the wonderful facility there. And I was sitting there waiting to listen to a mind who's known in the defense world. Instead, he spent the first part of his presentation speaking about the peacekeeping force he was part of. He spoke about the non-violent ways in which he dealt with work in Africa. And I think, Arun, what you say about deep listening also resonates with so many of us, especially for me, who comes from the world of pediatrics and public health. For us working with children in health, the beginning is listening. Half the healing is listening deeply, half the diagnosis is listening. We heard you today speak very clearly of 3 things in shaping the future. You have challenged us to learn, and learning means unlearning as well, to give up what hasn't worked, to replace things that are outdated. And you're calling for a very deep type of unlearning, Arun, if I can articulate it like that way. You're asking us to go back to the roots, people first, at a time where data sometimes dehumanizes. It's a loud call to remember the human being in front. We hear you. You are speaking about listening and creating listening spaces. And so as you come to the last 5 minutes, I want to say what is the expectation from Shankar, who is our thought leader here, getting us together. But Srivats, to you, at your invitation, at CII's invitation, all of you on the Curators Council, to whom I have the privilege to belong, I think it's to create neutral spaces, if there's anything like a neutral place, to be able to listen to one another and to think more deeply. Complex issues, we always tell children, the only way to deal with complexity is to break it down. Even if it's a problem of enormity and enormous sizes, you have to start where you can. And I think, why shouldn't India dare to do that? With the kind of privileges we have, the connectivity we have, the challenges that come in, I think we should dare And I think the daring should not only be asked of the government, the daring should start with personal change and transformation as well. I'm coming to the last question, and that is acknowledging, as someone who's inspired deeply by Mahatma Gandhi, and I feel I don't want to keep him in the past. His thought, his way of working, the way he built communities is relevant today. We build communities the way we know today. A public health person around. I got into medicine because of Srivat's aunt, grand aunt, Dr. Soundaram. I was a 10-year-old when my father was vice chancellor. I heard her repeat, health for all, health for all, health for all. I didn't know what it meant then. But she took me to meeting after meeting and she said, health for all. Today, I heard, when India won independence, Dr. Soundaram brought 100 workers from Gandhigram Shankar and asked them to go to 100 villages to announce in 1947 India was free. And she went on a lecture tour saying what that freedom meant. What can that new voice be? What can that new model be, Arun? Is something that I want you to incorporate in the last answer. What is your wish for India?
My wish for India, as you said, is all of us must start from where we are. And if we are together, there is a power in together where we are, using that, changing that. We are here at the Nilgiri dialogues. And Shankar and I already talked about it. We said, look, we are people like us. I mean, we are the 1%. If you really want to listen to India and to get better ideas, and ideas that are relevant, I hope that the next time you do the dialogue, it will not be like the World Economic Forum. The World Economic Forum is a place for the richest people and the most presently powerful people in the world together. It's a club for that sort of networking. And I don't know, they can keep announcing DEI, and right now, all the big proponents of DEI are running for cover and saying, no, no, there will not be any DEI because, well, they'll get hammered by the markets to do that. Please, the next dialogue, as I said, could you have some farmers and workers in the dialogue? Now, it's not easy because, firstly, what can we learn from them? It's just something about you. Yes. Please have them. And I would hope that the next, and you can do it. When I was in the Planning Commission, I was unable to do it. We had dialogues, 100 people at a time, school teachers, school children, farmers, workers, business leaders, government people, in a day and a half dialogue similar to this one. But you know, the subjects may be the same, but the voices and the ideas are very different. Could you do it?
The answer, we will try our best.
Thank you.
I think this really comes from the depth. A big round of applause, a big round of applause. Before I use my last minute, I think this is the wish. This is the wish that was expressed on the eve on the curators meet, that we are able to create a space to think and listen together and work together. But Arun, I also have to say, will you be with us?
My wife keeps asking me, when have you retired? And she says herself, when you're with people who are, you know, got the same ambition as you have, that's what the picture of all of us doing that, how can you retire?
So, wonderful. So I think that's what I wanted. One of the things we spoke at the curators meet, we were all there together, Mr. Devarajan, is we want you to work with us. We want to have hands and ears that will work with us. I want you to enjoy this hour in the quiet of your evening. Would you challenge yourself to more listening? Would you challenge yourself to look into the community that you belong? Whatever that community is, your neighborhood, your sector, your own workplace. I remember at Harvard walking in to seeing a phrase, a community at work. And I often say it should not only be a community at work, it should be a community at work that cares for what they do. And no community has ever been able to care for others if they don't learn to care for themselves. So give me the freedom to remember Mahatma Gandhi here, where he said, every time you're in doubt, remember this little talisman. Recall the face of the last and the least. But in this new India, let us recall everybody, not just the last and the least. And if what you are doing can change their lives for the better, even a little bit, then what you're doing is right. Ladies and gentlemen, for this hour of patient listening, for this wonderful talk, Arun, and to the hearts in CII that lead us in this dialogue, a very, very sincere thank you. And a big shout out to the young and the dynamic team. Please just show us your faces, stand up, Tulsi and everyone. Ladies and gentlemen, please give them a big round of applause for bringing us together.